Give it up, Rich. What's the big secret?
No, I'm not giving it up yet.
Oh, man.
You got to talk about Goffstown first.
Oh, man.
You just keep me hanging on.
Hey, I am nothing compared to some people out there. But we have another right to know. I won't even call it a request. I'll call it a demand. Stacey Buckley, the superintendent of schools in Goffstown, went to the Goffstown School Board on the 17th with a recommendation to hire a company called West Ed to do the consultant work for the Mountain View Middle School. You know, this is the big mystery out there. We need a consultant to figure out why Mountain View is this dysfunctional mess, even though there's any number of public sources that will gladly for free tell you what the mess is all about.
Yeah, can I bid for that gig?
Yeah. Well,
it would take me maybe an hour to figure it out, if that. Actually, give me 5 minutes. I'll point the finger.
Well, the interesting thing is that there was a bidder who came in with $1. He didn't get the award. There was a bidder who came in at $27,000. Didn't get the award. There was a bidder that came in at $31,581. That's West Ed. They got the award. And there was a bidder who came in at $40,000. Didn't get the award. So Stacey Buckley refused.
31,000 is the magic number.
Apparently. But Stacey Buckley, the superintendent of schools, refused to reply to questions from school board members about the basis of her recommendation and what metric, I hate that term, but what was the metric or the matrix used to determine who got the bid, and she refused to answer, saying that, well, to do so might compromise, might give another bidder information that would allow it to come back and improve its bid and somehow get something they didn't deserve, kind of thing. So the bids were due within 5 days of receiving the bids. Within 5 days of receiving the bids, she was making recommendations on who the bidder should be. Now, what's that tell you? 5 days? Really? 5 days? And by the way, of the 5 days, guess how many of them were weekend days?
At least two.
At least two.
You're just going out on a limb there. Well, maybe they're just very, very efficient.
Oh, yeah.
You ever think maybe that would be what it is? Maybe not.
And I happen to know that Ben Hampton, who was one of the bidders, who my guess is, Ben Hampton sent me his bid. I know he was a buck. Didn't even get a phone call for an interview.
Think of what a great public relations coup that would have been if they could have gone to the town's taxpayers and said, we got this great guy who is a consultant who's offered to give us his professional consulting services, and it's only going to cost us $1. And we go, you guys are geniuses.
And let me tell you something. It's not like Ben Hampton isn't qualified.
Oh, guy, he's qualified all day long.
You can go to Oh My Blog, or you can go to girardatlarge.com, and you can use our search bar and you type in Ben Hampton.
Yeah.
You'll see we have published this man's credentials. We've interviewed him. You can listen.
Well, how does the $35,000 people stack up against his credentials?
We don't know.
What kind of credentials they got? Yeah.
They won't release any of it.
That ought to be something.
So so now having made the award, now they tried to go into non-public session, but they were talked out of it, I believe, by Dan Cloutier. Good decision not to, because she was only going to release that information in non-public session. Well, I'm sorry, you can't do that. Now, if you had put something on the agenda and said, you know what? I need direction from the board. I'd like to do a preliminary review of the bids and find out what the sense of the board is about how to proceed with bidder A or bidder B or bidder C. And you're still in negotiations. You're still going through the process. Perfectly legitimate to go into non-public session. But when you come to the board and you say, yeah, here's my recommendation, and then you refuse to release the criterion that you based your recommendation on, under the guise that it will somehow compromise negotiations, which must be over because you're making your recommendation, and then you say, well, I'll only do it in non-public, is just a way for you to hide the information. Now the bid has been awarded. The bid has been awarded. Just like when you've concluded your negotiations with your administrators or your unions or whoever, once you've concluded the administrations and you've inked the contract, it must be made public. There is no public There's no law that says that you may keep that information private. And in this case, the reason why you go through a request for proposal, frankly, is to keep the governing body and the decision makers on the straight and narrow. I think Stacey Buckley is not only violating the law, but may be in contempt of the law. I think she may be acting in a manner that is contrary to the law. In other words, I really think that the Office of Public Integrity of the Attorney General's office might have to get involved. If somebody doesn't cough up the information, there's no reason for her to withhold the identities or the bids of all who submitted. Now that the recommendation has been made and now that the school board, absent the information members of its own body asked for, decided to move ahead and accept the recommendation. There is no public interest served by keeping this material under wraps. And Girard at Large last week submitted a right-to-know demand that the names of the bidders and the bids that they put forward be released to the public for inspection and scrutiny. There is no reason for this. None. And, you know, a shout out to other media outlets. Listen, we here at Girard at Large are happy to, with our adorable little radio show, raise these issues. We have no pride, however, in ownership. If you want to write about the story like, oh, you never heard about it here first, be my guest. I am interested in a proper public result or outcome for the public. And to have media outlets out there who know about this story. There's no doubt that they know about this story. Not taking on the story just because we're the ones who are on it and broke it, you're doing a disservice to your readers. You can flap your gums all you want about the $35,000 expense. The bigger story here is, why are they not following the right to know law? The bigger story here is, why did Diane McCarthy, the vice chairman of the Goffstown School Board, whose employer was a bidder in the process, finally decide that it would be a conflict of interest for her to vote on the matter, even though the company that was recommended was not the company she works for? Now, it would seem to me that if Diane McCarthy wanted to say, hey, listen, I've been above board this whole process, she would have gone with the superintendent's recommendation and voted to accept her recommendation and award the bid to a company who was not her employer. But instead, the one vote that this woman abstains from, the one vote where she says, oh, I have a conflict of interest, I'm going to recuse myself from the discussion, the one time she does it happens to be the one time where her employer is not in the game. Now, that's just stupid. Now, she did tell me in an email months ago that she would not vote on the final award of the contract because of her employment status with one of the bidders, but
if you eliminate all the other ones, you don't need to vote on the
Thank you.
I mean, come on.
And this playing even got to a point that it is, because she cast a tie-breaking vote back in August or July. I forget what it was. I have to look it up. But she cast a tie-breaking vote to keep this process alive, even though she has under the Goffstown School Board's own conflict of interest policy, she is acting in direct contradiction. She continued to participate in the discussions. She continued to cast votes that let this process go forward. And the one vote she doesn't cast is the one vote that would not reward her employer with a contract. Now, she is either a dim bulb in need of a filament upgrade, or she's up to no good, exactly as DJ Davis chirping away in the back there. Now, her one vote wasn't going to stop this contract. She recused herself. Lori Cloutier abstained because it was her questions that weren't being answered by the superintendent. I'm sorry, I don't abstain for lack of information. I say, screw you. You did not answer my questions. I cannot make this decision, and I vote no. And Dan Cloutier also voted no. But this is a problem. Wake up, Goffstown.
Well, that's the thing. To boil it down to simple, understand terms, for Goffstown taxpayers, you've got a person on a board who has been, integral in getting a contract for a company they work for, when one of the bidders is bidding $1 and the other contract is $35,000 bid. Yep. I mean, does that not smell funny? Anybody go, wait a minute, I got somebody who's working on a board that I'm paying taxes for, and their company is going to benefit from this, and they're voting on
wrong with
that.
this,
smells
Mike.
bad.
And I got to tell you,
whether they're all above board or not, that looks bad and it doesn't smell right.
Well, from a public relations point of view, does it make a lick of sense if I'm the superintendent of schools or I'm a member of the school board? You've got a town resident who is eminently qualified. At least it looks like to we stupid people on the outside who can read that he seems to meet all of the qualifications required by this bid process.
Trying to do a public service.
Trying to do a public service for a buck. You don't even return the guy's phone calls. You don't send him an email acknowledging receipt of his bid. You don't call him in for an interview. Really? You don't answer your school board members' questions that defend a $35,581 decision when you could have done it for a buck? You don't release any of that information? How abysmally stupid do they think we are, or must we be, to think there's something wrong with that process?
Well, as I've said before, we're just talking about this one instance. This calls into question. The first thing that popped into my mind, has this been the way they've been doing business all along? And how many times has this thing happened before? Nobody ever found out about it.
Well, and you know what? We have been the only media outlet reporting on this conflict of interest with the vice chairman, on the failure of this body to follow the right to know laws, on the failure of this body to issue. There was one newspaper article that called into question why they didn't go for a formal request for proposal, but nobody took Keith Allard, a former chairman of this board, out at the knees for saying, "Oh, it's for specialty services. We don't need to do that." Have you read your own bid policies? Which, by the way, I threw back at Stacey Buckley because she, in one of her answers to me said, "Oh yeah, there are no board policies or state laws governing the request for proposal process," which caused me to send her back one of her own emails that actually had a link to the school board's RFP proposal, RFP policy, and when they're supposed to be issued. Yeah, it's for anything over $5,000. Well, Keith Allard says, well, companies that bid on this stuff aren't going to be found in the local papers anywhere. Really? Do the people in Ceresque, which is headquartered in Bedford, not read local papers? But that's not the point. The point is the public reads the local paper. The public wants to know what's going on. This is crazy. I think it even borders on criminal. I have to tell you, they're either criminally stupid or they're acting with direct malintent to get what they want. Absent that process, this has got to stop. And to the school board members in Goffstown who don't agree with this, your timidity is truly disheartening. You need to start being an advocate for the rule of law and the proper process. And if you're not sure, err on the side of transparency to the public. You can never be too transparent with the public. And your fellow board members may not like it, but let them defend their desire to be secret.
WLMW 90.7 FM.
It's uplifting and powerful, and it's a good message all around.
New Hampshire Family Radio.
It's just a good station to listen to.